Energy. I'd like to shift our attention now and look a little bit about monuments. Another thing that this region is very concerned about started right here in the Price and Emery County areas when they were talking about monument designation under Governor Lovett. But now we're looking at potential monuments and word from the administration that they want to go on a monument-making spree over the next couple of years. What do we do about monuments? I mean, obviously, this is not something your office is concerned about.
Well, there's two things. Fundamentally, it is just principally wrong that the chief executive officer or the president of the United States can unilaterally use the stroke of his pen, invoke the Antiquities Act, which is just, it's been contorted over the decades, use that Antiquities Act without any public input, without hearing anybody locally, and just take federal land and then designate it as wilderness. That's just patently unfair. I don't care if you're Democrat or Republican in office. That is a power that goes too far. And I think is without precedent going back to its original intention. Over the course of years, it has morphed into something that is just untenable because there are potentially millions of acres that can be overturned. I'm working very closely with Rob Bishop and Chris Stewart to try to get the stakeholders at all ends of the political spectrum to participate with the counties in developing a process where we can not just swap lands, but come up with a package that will allow for certainty over the long period of time. There's nothing worse than going through this process and then at the end of it, all of a sudden it's just a flurry of lawsuits. And then there's, again, uncertainty into the program. So we want ultimately for there to be certainty. There are certain parts of Utah and the United States of America that are probably genuinely wilderness that we're not going to touch. And even if we didn't pass a bill, they would still be wilderness. But there are other parts that deserve multiple use that need to be designated as energy development that ought to be able to ride our ATVs and our bicycles on. The recreational community should be able to access things. I think there's an educational component. When people say, oh, we want to get out, we want wilderness, but do they realize they're not going to be able to drive out there? Do they realize that they're not going to be able to take a bicycle in certain parts of this wilderness? I think there's an education as to what wilderness truly is versus maybe what multiple use is. And I find that most Utahns, when they really think about it, study it, they want multiple use. And that ought to be our national objective. And that's what I'm working with Congressman Bishop and Congressman Stewart on.
Is there a possibility of or a provision of a bill coming through that will actually stop the mass wholesale monument designation without local buy-in?
Well, part of what we're looking at and exploring and doing this is allowing the counties. Right now we're talking to 7 counties and maybe 8 if Daggett County comes on board. Well, we're looking at 7 different counties where they have a county-driven process as best we can. They're supportive of it. We'll include it in a bill, and hopefully we can add provisions like, for instance, a prohibition on the Antiquities Act. This does have historical precedent in that I believe it was Wyoming and Alaska that did this decades ago when they had some designations done for wilderness, but they got into the law that the president therefore would no longer be able to use the Antiquities Act to designate these monuments. We ought to be doing that in Utah. Let's learn from what Wyoming and Alaska did. I think that's the right solution for Utah as well.